No. Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest is Jonathan Norman, the managing director of Aerospace. Jonathan, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Normanus Aerospace?
Hey, Nate, how's it going? Thank you for having me here.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
for sure. Normanas Aerospace is an engineering company. We've been operating for the last 3 years. My background in aviation, I've been in aviation for 25 years. I'm a commercial pilot, aviation engineer. I did the entire corporate ladder, so to say, for many, many years. And 3 years ago, we started Normanas with a couple of business partners because we found the gap that we got in aerospace business development. And the proposal that Normanas brings to the market basically is advising airport, airline, and aviation IT companies slash VC capitals in terms of
Hmm.
how to develop business in aerospace, which is kind of a very unique thing. It's not comparable to other industries. So we try to cover the gap. We're doing really good, and we are mixing it a little bit with also with a lot of branding, corporate branding that we do with several airlines. Right now, we're working a lot with Ethiopian Airlines, and and we're covering that gap. So I mean, we are slowly starting to get visibility around the globe, but yeah, it's doing good.
That's great. Your site stresses strategy and execution. Where do or airport programs most often stall? Governance, data, vendor sprawl, or internal capability? Any playbook you rely on?
Sorry, you got there. So in terms of strategy, you mean on aviation strategy?
Yeah, your site stresses strategy and execution. Where do airline or airport programs most often stall? Governance, data, vendor sprawl, or internal capability?
Well, in for example, there are different airlines from airports, but usually airlines they get a really hard time putting the macroeconomic strategy. Like
Mm-hmm.
airlines are extremely good on microeconomics and just putting the operations together and be very efficient with the revenue management. But when they are starting up the business model or looking to expand to certain markets, they don't do the proper due diligence in regards to demographics and macroeconomic studies. Like I'll give you an example. Like we're talking about right now at Spirit Airlines with all the bankruptcy and everything that is happening to them. But truth to be spoken, ULCC models in North America are very hard to work. It's very hard to make them work on the way that they work in Europe, like EasyJets or Ryanair. What is the explanation? Because something that is called the GDP per capita. The GDP per capita in the United States, for example, is much, much higher than Europe,
Okay.
almost twice or more. So when you get that, the purchase power of the population is much bigger. So the incidence of an airfare on a total budget for vacations, for example, it's not the same that in Europe. For example, Ryanair or even EasyJets, they got low cost passengers because they adjust to a budget that is in accordance with the total amount of money that they're planning to spend on vacations. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, Spirit is operating out of Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale is one of the highest GDP in the entire country.
Yeah.
People really don't care the value of the ticket. Like, it's an
Mm-hmm.
assumption. It's just another expense. They would care more about the hotel. So then
Yeah.
you start seeing that the business model of the airline does not match with the market that is operating. So Spirit
Mm-hmm.
should be operating out of different markets that they are currently operating, and that's part of the reason of the failure. Then you got other examples like Frontier or Southwest back in the days that they were low cost carriers and they are switching their model. Frontier is the latest one because they are, slowly changing the business model. They claim to be a low cost carrier, but they just introduce a low first class product. You are not a low cost carrier anymore. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a little bit what it means in towards strategy. For airports, it's different because airports didn't know anything about route development like 12 years ago. They
Yeah.
didn't care about it. They were just receptive. An airline would get to them, we want to fly, and based on that, they would start planning. Airports 10 years ago, they started to develop the network and understanding, okay, how we can bring those airlines here that they match our profile of our region, of our city, of our country, and just exploit on tourism, corporate industry, whatever it means. So for that thing, you need a strategy. So airports probably are the biggest customers or people that reach us because it's not brand new, but they started doing it 10 years ago. So if you get out of the major tier one airports and you go into tier two or tier three, they are not that acquainted in terms of the possibilities or how they can expand. And also the airports, they got the air side and they got the land side. So
Yeah.
there's also development that you need to do on the land side in order for the air side being capable, of getting also revenue and not relying only on air side revenue for passenger fees. So airport got a lot of strategy going on. And then the one that we got our most customers are aerospace IT companies that are looking to develop a business pipeline to distribute their products, because that's the biggest gap that I found over the years in aviation. Like companies, they got great products on aerospace, but they do not understand the business development pipeline in the industry. They assume that they can compare it to healthcare, they can compare it to fintech, but it's not
Hmm.
like that. Like especially if you're trying to penetrate like an airport environment, the sales life cycle is extremely long. So it's not about having the right product and the right pitch, but also having the right network and having the resilience to go over time in just pitching. Because I mean, it's a very frustrating process that you
Hmm.
need to have a very determined team that knows, well, which doors to knock. You want to sell something to any US major airline, you're talking about 200,000 employees. You really need to
Yeah.
know which door you're trying to knock. So, I
Hmm.
mean, and then when you take it globally, okay, I mean, you want to penetrate a market in Middle East or Asia, and there's a huge cultural barrier in terms of how they do business and how the process of doing business is done. So that's the gap that I found over the years working for major consulting companies. And that was like the main purpose when we started Normanas is okay, closing that gap and not consulting on business development, but actually executing ourselves and creating that business pipeline for our customers. And we've been successful so far.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
So what's moved the needle most for non-aero revenue in the last 24 months? Passenger flow redesign, Tennessee mix, pricing, or data-driven retailing?
Non non-aeronautical revenue, I mean, really depends on the region of the world and how they manage. I mean, you got a lot of retail revenue outside North America, especially in Europe or even South America. Like the land side of the airport has tons of retail. Like US airports do not have anything close to the retail availability that they got, in other markets. So there you get a switch on ancillaries. In regards to passenger flow, I mean, technology has been there for almost, I would say, 8 to 9 years in terms of biometrics, infrared. I saw one Indian solution like 4 years ago that was quite good in terms of how they coordinate the flow of passengers inside the airline depending on the airport, sorry, depending
Hmm.
on the location of the gate of the flight and the consumption habits of their passengers. It was quite interesting. This was before AI, Yeah, I would call it more machine learning than AI. and
Yeah.
uh, and and it was very successful because what they do there, they optimize the ancillary of the airport. So let's say that you got on gate 35, you got an Emirates flight, and you know that your flight is departing from UAE to India, and you know that whiskey is cheaper in the UAE than in India, or the other way around. And you know that a lot of all the customers or flights that go to India, they purchase whiskey or spirits before getting into that flight. So they adjust the gating allocation to be closest to the duty free that sells those spirits, and they make sure to have promotions at the gate very easy to grab because they are right in front of the gate. So they allocate the gates better to increase consumption. That's one of the things that they are doing in terms of fine tuning the ancillary revenue. And then the other thing that is growing a lot is hospitality services inside the airports. I mean, I don't want to be old school in saying lounges because for me lounges is like they exploded 3 years ago after COVID is like every airport has 5 lounges,
Yeah.
so it's it's
Yeah.
madness. I
Yeah.
mean, I think at some point they will start leveling off. The other thing with luxury and airport management and airline management is like you cannot measure US carriers against the rest of the world. It's
Hmm.
not measurable. You are talking about guys with 1,000 airplanes against guys with 150. I mean, the business concept is completely different. It's a completely different analysis. But but in terms of how they grow, hospitality services, you're starting seeing hotels inside the terminal. You're starting to see these small, how they call it, they used to have it in Asia first. These more cubicles with a bed that you can, if you got a long layover, you can pay 20, $30 and stay there
Yeah.
and have a very nice bed on the corner. So that started developing back in Asia, and the tendency is going across the globe in terms of those services inside the terminal. and
Hmm.
uh, and then the bypassing security lines. If you got status, that's a service that's been introduced probably after COVID-19, when we got like very structured biometric procedures that right now they're easy going. But people forget that. But before 9/11, before COVID-19, we didn't have biometrics. The type
Hmm.
of system that they were very, very slow. After COVID-19, biometrics like technology really, really progressed, and now we can go a very easy checkpoint either for security or customs. So that helped a lot with hospitality services in terms of airports. But I would think that those are the tendencies right now, the way that they're going.
Got you. Got you. On the airline side, how are you seeing schedule optimization and product decisions adapt to today's demand shape and cost base? Where does brand actually change yield?
I mean, route optimization is a very complex process. You got the operation dispatch by itself, and then you got revenue management. So there are two different things. I mean, the optimization, you got two different type of optimization: the optimization that comes from airlines and the optimization that comes from civil aviation authorities. I mean, what is optimization from a civil aviation authority side is doing approaches into the airfield that are more direct into the airport, and you don't have to hold around, and goof around the city. That's coming in the US. They're doing a really good job. I think Asia is doing an amazing job in terms of approaches, and that saves a lot of times in terms of efficiencies and route planning, because the ETAs are more exact. Um, and, and then on the route is just managing costs the right way and creating hub structures. And I think the next wave of things that we will see, it's actually not a new thing. It's something that already happened in the past for many years, and it's what it's called focus cities. I mean, that's how Southwest was developed. Southwest was not developed with hubs; it was developed with focus cities. Um, right now, then the company grows to 800 airplanes. So right now it's huge. But I mean, on the beginnings, they were doing focus cities like Baltimore, like Nashville, like Dallas, like LAX, like
Hmm.
Oakland. So that type of business model that makes connecting on one stop more efficient, I think is gonna come on some of the bigger airlines that are trying to allocate focus cities, like United or even American. They got hubs all over the United States. But for example, United created a focus city in Japan, and they are using Narita in Japan as a focus city when they got actually United fly 737s out of Narita right now. So they are using that strategy of focus city to leverage on revenue that they can get in order to optimize the routes. So I mean, in terms of route planning, that's where you got, of course, and then you got the huge disruption conflicts. Like Russia airspace right now being closed is a huge disruptor. To connect Europe to the Far East, and it has a huge impact on route planning. So it's kind of a complex problem because it's not only about technology, it's also about policy. So, I mean, it mixes a little bit both of them.
Got you. Okay. Where is brand positioning shift translated into measurable RASK, non-aero ADR, or corporate share wins? What metrics do you insist on before and after?
In terms of the brand of measuring like performance for airlines, you mean?
RASK, non-aero ADR.
It depends. I'm not a revenue management expert. There are two different philosophies. Someone that likes to measure the available, the capacities for everyone, but I mean how you measure the revenue per seat. I'm more type of an entrepreneur guy, so I like to see the routes in terms of the cost basis per month and get the revenue basis per month and see how the overall structure is working. But I come from a fintech background, so I'm more into finances in terms of how I see at the balance sheets. But I mean, if you are a revenue management guy, you would tell me, no, this guy is absolutely crazy. You need to measure the revenue by seat. You got certain ratios that you can get on specific details on the airlines. But I mean, I never have the background of the experience to do like mid management positions or revenue management. So everything that I've done is being from an executive standpoint. So I
Mhm.
mean, from that standpoint, you just look at the overall numbers. So I mean, I cannot give you a very specific answer on that because I never did middle management on revenue.
Understand. Okay. So what did the last 2 years teach your clients about supply chain and workforce resilience, and what contingency structures actually held up under stress?
Supply chain is the biggest part for an OEM. Well, for pretty much every business, the thing is like supply chains were heavily disrupted on COVID-19. So everything went back to zero or very close to zero. So coming back to the numbers that it used to be before COVID took us like 2.5 years or 3 years. And then you got the geopolitical, you know, uh, things that are going on right now in the world with Russia, with China, with the US, with the trading, with the tariffs, that
Yeah.
they take heavy tolls on the supply chains. Until this point, every major OEM has problems with supply chains, either engine manufacturers or airframe manufacturers. So I mean, it's a huge part. How you optimize them? That's a good question. I mean, for me, it depends on the rationality. What means rationality? Okay, I'll give you an example. Uruguay, when I used to work for Uruguayan Airlines back on 2008, they picked the fleet selection and they picked to operate aircraft from Bombardier. They bought the first CRJs 900 that came out of the market from Mirabel in Canada.
Mhm.
Despite Uruguay being two 2 hours by airplane away of Embraer hub in Brazil and get 190s E190s to fly. I mean, that was a very ill decision in regards to supply chain because now why you would pick an aircraft type that you are 10,000 miles away of the hub and they don't have absolutely no part support in South America instead of picking, even if the cost per unit is a little more expensive, you would get part support and maintenance 2 hours from your main hub. I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer, but by doing that, you have dramatically optimized your supply chain. You know, so applying rationality, it's a big thing. Nevertheless, you need to have a proper strategy, especially with parts and maintenance right now. I mean, we are having some latest engine problems in several aircraft, being the A220, uh, the biggest one. Like huge,
Mhm.
huge issues with the engines and the parts. And you need to have a really good provider base. Have part pooling in different part of the world, being able to get those OAG parts fast, so you don't lose profitable time on the airframes. So, I
Mhm.
mean, that's kind of optimizing the supply chain, being smart in terms of the way that you negotiate and the way that you get your provider chain around the world and not stick only with one. Because if that one fails for some reason, you are stuck. And amazingly enough, someone would say, well, but that's like the ABC. You would have more than one provider. Not really. When you go and see small airlines, not really. They get stuck with one provider, then they got an airplane on the ground. The part pooling agreement that they got in place, they didn't have the part, so they have to go and look for the part from someone else, and it takes a lot of research and man hours to get that part. So I mean, having a good supplier chain is very, very important, especially for the airlines.
Understand. All right. So for mid-sized carriers, what's the smartest small bet in the next 12 months? ancillary redesign, schedule simplification, lounge product refresh, or distribution moves?
For mid carriers, should define mid carriers, less than 80 airplanes, between 80 and 150 airplanes. I mean, depends on that, but I would say all of the above. I mean,
Mm,
at this point, there's no a single action that would declare you a winner. I think you have to be very efficient in everything. And right now, I think the difference between aviation right now and 10 years ago is that IT solutions play a huge, huge role in terms of automating procedures, and having the right solutions in place for airlines and for airports. I can give you an example about that. I mean, we did with one of our customers in Canada, JKI. We did one of I think it was the first digital audit of de-icing systems at Chicago O'Hare. And we installed the systems that basically the system is an automated follow me system that takes you to the de-icing pads. They de-ice you using like an iPad software that is very fancy in terms it's like a car wash. So you pick which part of the airplanes you want to be de-iced, and it clears you right away on the same control into the runway for takeoff. I mean, that application became in less than 3 years the mandatory winter operation solution. Like if you are an airport in winter operations and you don't have JKI systems, you're in a huge problem, because the amount of money that you are overspending for not having that system, it's huge, and it's pretty much the only de-icing solution available in the planet. So I mean, those type of stuff, if you are not quick right now with IT, you are either leaving money on the table or you are spending too much. And there's a huge gap on that. I would say, I don't want to put all the countries together, but the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere have a huge gap in terms of technological adoptions. So that's a big thing. And in regards to the airlines, yes, all the solutions that would help them, they would need to properly analyze them and integrate it into the flow. Like in Normanas, we got a culture that we say, if you're going to a meeting with a customer and you cannot propose a solution that either increases their revenue or decreases their cost, cancel the meeting. So I mean, I would apply that culture to every other airline, because
mhm.
it's what everyone should be looking in the different areas, of the business.
Got you, got you. Okay, so to wrap this up, this last question. If a CEO gives you 90 days and one KPI to prove value, which KPI do you pick for an airport and which for an airline and why? Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
For an airport, I would guess on time performance. You know, I mean, uh, all you do at an airport comes down to on time performance KPI.
Hmm.
What I would say that this is the shady part of the industry. I would say a reliable on time performance indicator,
Reliable.
something
Okay.
based, a reliable, because you cannot rely on airline declared on-time performance, because they call something that is used the IATA codes, that they
Hmm.
use it back and forward to avoid their delays in order to not be um, penalized by
Yeah.
the authorities, or to reimburse passengers. If you got a problem for like, I see this all the time in the US, you get a delay for the fueling track, and then your flight takes off 45 minutes later, and then you go and make a claim because you lose the meeting at the arriving airport, and they tell you weather.
Yeah.
No, it was a weather delay. What weather, my friend? It's clear skies, not a single cloud in the sky. What? Oh, no, no. The IATA system says it was weather. It was a weather delay. So, I mean, when you're looking at airports, airports should have their own KPI for on-time performance. And I think that would be the main one for any airport in the world.
All right. Well, those are some great insights you gave us, and it was great having you on,
My
Jonathan.
pleasure, Daniel. Just let me know whatever you need, guys. I'm always here. Okay. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, sir. All right, I'm going to end the recording.